That night, when my ribs burned from my son's rough push, I didn't scream. I just quietly got up and took the one thing he'd never noticed, the thing sitting right in front of him for years. By morning, every account, every career door, and every ally had turned against him. Because it wasn't about money. It was about control. My name is Marion Doyle. I am 61 years old. And for the past 4 years, since my husband passed, I've been what people politely call a widow. I live in Briarfield, a town that sounds quainter than it is, for 30 years. I was the treasurer for the Northwick Community Works, a job that required meticulous attention to detail and an unwavering sense of order. I balanced budgets down to the penny. I believed in structure, in accountability. My family, or what remains of it, is my son, Evan. He is 32 and works as a project manager at a private construction firm. He married Sabrina 2 years ago. She's 29 and calls herself a freelance brand consultant, a job that, as far as I could tell, mostly involved curating an expensive image on social media. When Evan first got married, I thought it was sensible to add his name to a few of my accounts, just as a co-signer. In case of an emergency, Mum, he'd said, his voice earnest. You know, just to help you out if you ever need anything. I saw the logic. I was getting older, living alone. It felt like a practical safety net, woven from the trust I had in my only son. The emergencies, however, started to look different than I'd imagined. Evan's visits, once a reliable Sunday dinner, became sporadic. A text message would arrive late Saturday night. Work is crazy. Mom, rain check. Then, I started seeing Sabrina's posts. She'd borrow the emergency card just for a quick purchase. She'd text, and hours later, a new leather handbag, the kind that costs more than my monthly mortgage payment, would appear on her feed, captioned, "Blessed." The chill didn't truly set in until the week of Evan's promotion. We had planned a dinner, just the three of us, to celebrate. It was my treat. On Friday afternoon, my phone lit up with a text, not from Evan, but from Sabrina. So sorry, Marion. Evan is completely swamped with the new project. We have to cancel tonight. He's just exhausted. I felt the familiar sting of disappointment, but texted back my understanding. I made myself a simple dinner and decided to take a walk, something I often did to clear my head. The evening air was crisp, and the streets of Briarfield were quiet. My route took me past the town's nicer district, past Glass Haven, a restaurant with huge plate glass windows and a menu where entrees cost triple digits, and I saw them. They weren't exhausted. They weren't swamped. Evan and Sabrina were seated at the best table, bathed in the warm, artificial glow of the restaurant. They were surrounded by at least 10 friends, their faces bright with laughter. As I stood frozen on the sidewalk, Evan raised his champagne flute for a toast. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. It wasn't a text. It was a push notification from my bank. A charge attempt at Glass Haven for $754. From my account, the emergency card. A cold, sharp clarity cut through me. I didn't knock on the glass. I didn't call. I stepped back into the shadow of a nearby alcove, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. My fingers. The same fingers that had balanced ledgers for 3 decades. Moved steadily. I found the card number linked to the alert. I saw the button labelled Lock Card. I pressed it. I stayed long enough to watch. I saw Sabrina reach into her purse. I saw the waiter return to their table, his posture apologetic. I saw Sabrina's bright smile curdle into confusion, then darken into a mask of pure indignation as she handed him a different card, which was also declined. Through the glass, I saw her face turn ugly, her words visibly sharp as she hissed something at Evan. Then, Evan looked up. He scanned the restaurant, annoyed, and his eyes met mine through the window. He saw me standing there, on the dark sidewalk, watching him. For a heartbeat, his face was a mask of shock, of pure, unadulterated shame. He didn't wave. He didn't come outside. He just looked away, turning his shoulder to the window, leaving Sabrina to handle the humiliation of the declined payment. In that moment, all the small excuses flooded back. The just borrowing this until next week. Mom. The it's for my mental health. I needed a spa day. The you have to look the part for work. Marion. It's an investment. All the little paper cuts of disrespect. All the withdrawals from a bank of trust that I finally saw was empty. They didn't see me as a mother. They saw me as a resource, an open line of credit, a walking bank. I turned and walked home, and as I walked, I made a silent vow. If I am a bank, then this bank is closing, permanently. I didn't have to wait long. The sun was barely up the next morning when my front door burst open, not unlocked with a key, but slammed against the doorframe as Evan used the key he still had with force. He didn't call out a greeting. Turn the card back on. Now. He was standing in my foyer, his face pale and tight with a fury I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. He was still wearing the clothes from the night before, wrinkled and smelling faintly of champagne. "Good morning, Evan?" I said. My voice was steady. I was sitting at the small kitchen table, a place where he had eaten breakfast thousands of times. In front of me was a stack of papers. "I'm not doing this. Mom, turn it on." "I printed out the last 6 months of statements for that account," I said, sliding the stack across the table. "I thought we should review them." He didn't look at the papers. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "You embarrassed me. You embarrassed Sabrina in front of our friends, our contacts. The charge was for $754. Evan, at a restaurant I wasn't invited to, for a party you lied about, on my card. It was a business dinner, a celebration. You don't get it. You've never gotten it. You're sitting here in this house." He spat the word. "Counting pennies, while I am trying to build a life. And you humiliated me. And you are stealing from me," I said. The words hung in the air, simple and heavy. That was when he broke. It wasn't a gradual crescendo. It was a snap. The rage in his eyes flared, and he lunged, not to hit, not with a fist, but to intimidate. His hands were on my shoulders, and he shoved. A hard, violent push meant to put me in my place. I am 61. I am not frail, but I was unprepared. The shove sent me backward, off the chair. The corner of the kitchen table, the one I'd bought at an estate sale 20 years ago, caught me squarely in the hip. A sharp, white-hot crack of pain radiated up into my ribs. I crumpled to the linoleum floor. The wind knocked out of me. There was a moment of absolute, ringing silence. I was on the floor, gasping, holding my side. And I looked up at my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had held when his father died. And I saw a stranger, I saw a large, angry man who had just put his hands on his mother. His face wasn't apologetic. It was still contorted with rage, his chest heaving. The front door, still ajar, opened wider. It was Sabrina. She took in the scene, me on the floor. Evan standing over me. "Evan, what are you doing?" She snapped, but not in fear for me, in annoyance. "Get in the car. Don't let her control you with money." She grabbed his arm and yanked him toward the door. Evan gave me one last look. A flicker of something was it shame I couldn't tell. Then he turned and followed her. The front door slammed shut. The latch clicked. The house was perfectly, terribly quiet, broken only by my own ragged breathing. It took me a full minute to get to my feet. The pain in my hip was a deep, throbbing ache. I made it to the phone and dialed my neighbor. Not the police. Not yet. Marta Alvarez was at my door in 3 minutes. At 70. She has a spine of steel and eyes that have seen everything. She didn't fuss. She simply helped me to the sofa, lifted my shirt, and clucked her tongue at the bruise already darkening on my skin. "This is not from a fall," she said. It wasn't a question. "Evan," I whispered. The shame was so thick I could barely speak. Marta went to my kitchen, got a bag of frozen peas, and wrapped it in a dish towel. She sat with me as I held it to my side. She didn't pry. She just let the silence sit until I was ready. "He was angry. About money," I finally said. Marta nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the wall. "My son," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "Forged my signature 10 years ago. Used our house as collateral for a business loan. He lost it all." I looked at her, stunned. Marta lived in a small apartment now. I had never known why she'd sold her beautiful family home. "By the time I found out," she continued, "the bank had taken the house. My boy was gone, deep in debt and drugs, and I was left with nothing. Just shame. Shame that I let it happen. Shame that I didn't see. Shame that I didn't stop him when I could have." She turned her sharp, dark eyes on me. "You call the police, Marion. Or you do something else. But you do something. Don't wait, Mija. Don't wait until shame is all you have left." Her words landed like stones, building a foundation. The fog of shock began to clear, replaced by a cold, precise anger. She was right. This wasn't just a family argument. This was assault. This was theft. I would not report him to the police. Not yet. That was a blunt instrument. My mind, my treasurer's mind, started to turn. I would not be Marta, left with only shame. I would be Marion. I would act. But I would do it my way. Smart. With evidence. Within the law. After Marta left, the pain in my hip settled into a deep, rhythmic throb. It was a useful pain. It kept me focused. It reminded me that the barrier between my son and a stranger had been crossed. Evan saw me as someone who managed casserole recipes and church-bake sales. He forgot that for 30 years. I managed the intricate finances of a multi-million-dollar community fund. He forgot that I balanced budgets, traced discrepancies, and understood systems. And he forgot about the phone. It happened years ago, maybe 6 or 7. Evan was setting up his first serious corporate email, his first real bank accounts outside the local credit union. He was impatient, always clicking ahead, frustrated by the security prompts. "Mom, what's your cell?" he'd asked, not looking up from his laptop. "Why?" "It's for 2-factor authentication," 2FA. If I ever get locked out, or if they need to verify it's me, they send a code to your phone. You just read it to me. It's just a backup. It'll be faster. It sounded practical. A son keeping his mother in the loop. So, I gave it to him. And he used it. He used it for his primary bank. He used it for his investment apps. He used it as the recovery number for his work email. He even used it for the digital wallet he shared with Sabrina. Here is the detail Evan never considered. It was not his number to give. It was my number. It was on my name. Marion Doyle. It was on my monthly plan, which I paid from my own checking account on the 1st of every month. He saw a utility, a convenience. He failed to see the ownership. That afternoon, wincing as I lowered myself into my car, I did not drive toward the police station. I drove to the T-Mobile store in the next town, not the one in the Briarfield Mall that Sabrina frequented. I waited in line for 15 minutes. The young man at the counter was polite. "How can I help you?" "Ma'am, I need to port my number to a new SIM card," I said. I handed him my driver's license and the paper bill I had brought from home. "I believe I am the primary account holder." He checked. "Yes, ma'am. Marion Doyle. You've been with us for, wow, 18 years. I just need the number transferred to a new, secure SIM. I will be handling it myself from now on." It was a perfectly legal transaction. It took less than 10 minutes. I walked out of that store with a small piece of plastic, the size of my fingernail, and in doing so, I had just reclaimed the master key to Evan's entire digital life. This was not hacking. I had not broken a single law. I had simply taken back my own property. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the bag of frozen peas back on my hip, when my new phone, an inexpensive prepaid model I'd bought for this purpose, began to light up. The first was a text. "Your 6-digit login code for Northwick Trust Bank is 449-120. A minute later, your 6-digit login code for the Atlas Investment app is 830-227. Then a different kind of alert, a request to reset the password for the email Doyle Skybuild PM. Com has been initiated. He was trying to clean up. He was trying to get in, to hide the transactions, to change the passwords, to lock me out. But he couldn't. Every time he clicked, forgot password, every time the system tried to verify his identity, the request went to the phone in my hand. He was locked out, and I was the gatekeeper. While the codes continued to pour in a digital testament to his panic, I made my own calls. My first was to my local bank, the Briarfield Community Savings, where I knew the manager by name. "Helen, it's Marion Doyle," I said, my voice crisp. "I am in my home, and I am of sound mind. I am officially, as of this moment, revoking the limited power of attorney I granted to my son, Evan Doyle, 4 years ago. Is everything all right, Marion? I am simply updating my financial security. Helen, I also need you to sever his name from the joint savings account, number 7745, effective immediately." My next step was to log in to my own email. Now that I was looking, really looking, I started going through the archives. I opened the spam folders and the promotional tabs I usually ignored, and I found it. An automated email statement from something called the Apex Revolving Fund. I had never heard of it. But as I opened the PDF, I saw it clearly. Evan had established a line of credit, a spinning fund for his project expenses. And to secure it, as collateral, he had listed my primary credit card. The emergency card. He hadn't just been stealing petty cash. He had been using my good name and my decades of perfect credit as the financial bedrock for his entire charade. A little thing. An old woman's phone number. Something he'd set up and forgotten, assuming I'd be too technically inept to ever understand it. That one little thing was about to unravel everything he had. Marta did not just offer frozen peas and sympathy. She offered a name. Greta Lang, she said, her voice firm. She is not a bulldog. She is a chess player, and she does not like men who hurt their mothers. Greta Lang's office was small, neat, and on the second floor of an old brick building. She was 40, with sharp eyes and an absolute lack of fuss. I sat in her office, the bruise on my hip a dull, angry purple, and I told her everything: the emergency card, the lies, the restaurant, the bank notifications, the shove, and finally, the phone number. She listened without a single interruption. When I finished, she didn't offer condolences. She offered a plan. First, Greta said, let's look at the finances. She took the stack of statements I'd brought and spread them across her desk. Any expenditure made on a card designated for emergencies that was not, in fact, an emergency, is unauthorized use. Every boutique, every spa day, every expensive dinner. This is not a family dispute. Marion, this is grounds for civil reimbursement. Her next instruction was immediate. We back up everything, right now. She had me forward every single 2FA code text message from my new, cheap phone, every automated fraud alert from the bank, every password reset attempt. We took screenshots of Sabrina's social media posts, matching the dates of her luxury purchases with the withdrawals from my account. We built a fortress of evidence, saved to a secure cloud server. Then, we moved from defense to fortification. Your current will, Greta said. I assume Evan is the primary beneficiary. He was, I said. He isn't anymore. But a will can be contested. We are going to do something stronger. We are moving your Briarfield house into the Doyle Living Trust. Effective today. She explained it clearly. I would have a life estate, meaning I had absolute control and residency for as long as I lived. No one could sell it out from under me. No creditor of Evans could ever touch it. My home was becoming a fortress. And the Northwick apartment? She asked. It's in my name, I said, the shame hot in my throat. I let them stay there, rent-free. Their tenancy, Greta said, her voice flat, is over. We will have a process server deliver a formal 30-day notice to quit. They are tenants at will, and the will is finished. Before I left her office, she gave me 2 more tasks. Go to the hardware store, she said. Buy a video doorbell camera, one with cloud storage, the moment you get home. If he comes near your house again, if he so much as raises his voice on your porch, I want it recorded. This is for your personal safety. She also gave me a card for a trauma counselor. This isn't just about money. Marion, he put his hands on you. You need to learn the language of boundaries, and you need to practice it before you see him again. Finally, we set the trap. They are panicking, Greta said. Evan is locked out of his accounts, and Sabrina is locked out of yours. Their cash flow is gone. They are going to be desperate. She instructed me to activate 1 new credit card, in my name, with a very low limit. A $5,000 bait card, she called it. We're going to see how long it takes them to bite. We need to measure their greed. We scheduled a date for a dialogue at my house 3 days later. You will invite them to discuss the future, Greta said. Marta and her husband will be there as witnesses, and I will be there. As I stood to leave, I saw she had 2 new, empty manila folders on her desk. We will prepare 2 documents for that meeting, she said. The first is a fair, structured repayment agreement, civil, private, with clear consequences. The second, she tapped the other folder, is the complete civil lawsuit, alleging fraud, conversion, and seeking damages for the assault. It will be ready to file the next morning. She looked up at me. They will get to choose which folder we use. I let 1 full day of silence pass. The new video doorbell camera was installed, its small blue eye glowing faintly, watching my front porch. My cheap, new phone stayed busy, a constant stream of failed login attempts from Evan, like a frantic, digital knocking that I refused to answer. On the second day, I made my move. I sent a text message, not to Sabrina, but directly to Evan. I've been thinking, I wrote. I was hasty. I've activated a new card for you both, just for necessities, while we sort this out. I'm sorry. I attached a photo of the new card, the bait card Greta and I had discussed, with its $5,000 limit. It took less than 3 hours for the trap to spring. My personal phone, the one I'd kept, began to buzz. Not with calls, but with declined transaction alerts. $1,250 at Aura Spa. Declined. $2,800 at a designer boutique. Declined. $600 at Glass Haven. Declined. 7 attempts in total. They hadn't tried to buy gas. They hadn't tried to buy groceries. They had gone straight for the luxury that they felt they deserved. Seconds later, my phone rang. It was Sabrina. Her voice, usually so curated, was high and thin with panic. Marion, what is going on? The apology card you sent isn't working. We're standing here at the counter, and it was just declined. It's humiliating. I let a moment of silence hang between us. Oh dear, I said, my voice intentionally vague and frail. That's terrible. It must be some sort of security hold. I'll have to check on it. Well, check on it now. We're waiting. I'll have to call the bank, dear, I said softly. I'll get to it as soon as I can. I hung up. I did not call the bank. An hour later, a text from Evan. His tone was different. Not angry, but desperate. Mum, please. I need that card working. I am trying to lock in a massive contract for a new client. It's the future of my career. I just need a little more liquidity to finalize the deal. As his text arrived, the other phone, the one with my old, reclaimed number, lit up. Your 6-digit login code for SkyBuild PM email is 882104. A minute later, your 6-digit login code for Atlas Investment is 419900. He was frantic. He wasn't just trying to get the new card. He was trying to get back into his work email, his financial apps, to cover his tracks. He was trying to erase the evidence of the revolving fund he'd secured with my credit. I took screenshots of every code, every failed attempt, and forwarded them, along with Evan's text message, straight to Greta Lang. I also forwarded the fraud alerts to my bank manager, Helen, creating a meticulous, time-stamped record of his panic. Greta called me back. This is perfect. He's creating a clear pattern of behavior. I'm implementing the safety lock now. As we spoke, She was authorizing a co-signature requirement for any transaction over $1,000 related to any of my assets. Nothing would move without my physical signature. The pressure must have been building to an unbearable point. That evening, I received a new notification, a voice note from Sabrina. I played it on speaker. Her voice was no longer high and frantic. It was low, cold, and dripping with contempt. I don't know what game you think you are playing, Marion, but you need to stop. That contract Evan is working on is everything. It is his future. It is our future. And if you sabotage this for him because you're petty about some restaurant bill, you will regret it. You are an old woman, and you have no idea how the real world works. Turn the accounts back on. I saved the audio file. I labeled it Exhibit D. I sent it to Greta. The trap was now fully set. All the evidence was gathered. It was time to invite them home. I called Evan. He answered on the first ring. Evan, I said, pitching my voice to sound weary, defeated, and a little frail. I'm tired of fighting. You're right. I'm old, and I don't understand these things. I don't want to hurt your future. There was a sharp intake of breath on his end. So you'll turn the accounts on. I want to do more than that, I said, letting my voice tremble just slightly. I want to simplify things. I've been thinking about my estate. I want to sign some things over to you now. An early inheritance. To help you build that future you and Sabrina want. But I want to do it properly. With witnesses. The silence on the other end was heavy, stunned. Mum, an early inheritance. Yes, of course. That's incredibly generous. I could hear the greed coiling beneath the relief. Come to the house, Sunday, 4:00, I said. Marta and her husband will be here, just to witness the paperwork. We'll sign everything, and we can finally put this all behind us. We'll be there, he said, his voice thick. Sunday afternoon? At 4:00 sharp. My new doorbell camera recorded their arrival. They were dressed in their best clothes. Evan looked relieved. Sabrina was beaming, carrying a bouquet of flowers. They walked into my living room, their eyes bright, clearly expecting apologies and bank transfers. But on my dining room table, there were no inheritance papers. There were just 2 neat stacks of files, copies for them and copies for me. And at the head of the table, holding a pen, sat Greta Lang. The smile vanished from Sabrina's face the moment she saw Greta Lang at the head of my dining table. Evan just looked confused. The flowers in Sabrina's hand suddenly looked garish and out of place. Sit down. Evan. Sabrina, I said. My voice was no longer frail. Marta and her husband, Arturo, were seated by the fireplace. My other neighbours, Samuel and June, sat on the sofa. They were not just witnesses. They were my community. What is this? Evan asked, his gaze fixed on Greta. This, Greta said, her voice clear and professional, is a formal meeting to discuss financial and personal matters. For clarity and accuracy, I am making an audio recording. She tapped her phone, which was already recording on the table. Sabrina's smile was now a tight, angry line. You're recording us. This is a family matter. You're ambushing us. This stopped being a family matter, I said, when my son put his hands on me. Evan flinched. Samuel and June, who had not known that detail, looked visibly shocked. I called you here on a pretense, I said. Because it was the only way to get you in a room to face the truth. And today, you will face it. I slid the first folder across the table. This, I said, is a summary of the last 6 months of spending on the accounts you had access to, the emergency card, and the revolving fund you set up using my credit as collateral. Evan opened it. Sabrina craned her neck. I had itemized it all, just as I had for the community fund budgets. Total withdrawals, charges, and leveraged funds, I said, come to $312,000. That's impossible, Evan said, his face pale. Is it? I slid over the detailed breakdown. $3,000 for spa treatments, $18,000 on designer handbags, $40,000 in restaurant tabs, including the $754 at Glass Haven, and $200,000 in consulting fees and investment expenses moved into accounts I cannot trace. You were a control freak, monitoring every penny. Sabrina spat. We were building a brand, a life, something you wouldn't understand. I understand numbers, I said. I slid the second folder across the table. And I understand panic. These are screenshots. They are from my phone. Evan. The phone number you used for security, which you seem to have forgotten, is registered to and paid for by me. I fanned out the screenshots. Page after page of 2FA codes, password reset attempts, and fraud alerts. These, I said, pointing to the timestamps, began exactly 10 minutes after you left my house on Saturday morning, after you shoved me. You weren't trying to fix a mistake. Evan, you were trying to delete the evidence. You were trying to lock me out of the very accounts you were draining. I leaned forward. I have one question for you. Who tried to change the password on the Apex revolving fund exactly 2 minutes after shoving his mother into a table? Evan just stared at the papers, his jaw working, his face ashen. He had no answer. He couldn't lie. Not with the timestamps in front of him. This isn't an inheritance meeting, Greta said, her voice cutting through the silence. She pushed the final document toward them. This is a civil reimbursement agreement, and it's not a request. She explained the terms. It was a legally binding contract, acknowledging the debt of $312,000. It came with a strict payment plan and a conditional restraining order, to be filed with the court should he ever threaten me or come within 50 feet of my property uninvited. Sabrina finally broke. It was a spectacular implosion. You did this, she screamed, pointing at me. You set us up. We can't access anything without that stupid phone number. We're locked out of everything. The accounts, the investments, everything. How are we supposed to pay you back when you've taken away our access? She had just confessed, in a room full of witnesses and on an audio recording, that their entire livelihood was based on access they never legally owned. Greta just looked at her. Thank you for confirming that, Sabrina. That was when Evan shattered. It wasn't loud. He just dropped his head into his hands, his shoulders starting to shake. A low, terrible sound came from him, a sob of utter humiliation. I didn't mean it, he whispered, rocking. I was just so ashamed. At the restaurant. You saw me. I lost control. Yes, you did, I said. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical certainty. I won't sign it, Sabrina hissed, standing up. This is coercion. Then we will file the full civil suit tomorrow morning, Greta said calmly. It's already prepared. It includes fraud, conversion, and a petition for damages for the assault. I'm sure your contacts will be fascinated to read about it in the public filing. I looked at my son, who was still weeping. Then I looked at Sabrina. There is one more thing, the early inheritance. Here it is. I handed Evan one last sheet of paper. It wasn't a bank document. It was a formal 30-day notice to quit the Northwick apartment. Your tenancy is terminated. You have 30 days to remove your belongings. That was the final blow. Sabrina looked at the notice, then at me. Her face was a mask of pure hatred. You'll regret this, she seethed. She ripped the apartment key from her designer keychain and threw it. It skittered across the dining table, coming to a stop on the stack of bank statements. She stormed out of my house. The front door slammed, rattling the windows. I looked at the witnesses. I looked at Greta. And I looked at my son, who was still sitting at my table, crying, trapped by the wreckage he had built. He had nowhere else to go. He stayed. With Sabrina gone, the house was still. The only sound was the rustling of paper as Greta restacked the files. Evan sat there, a 32-year-old man reduced to a boy, his face blotchy and slick with tears. He didn't move. He was broken. "Evan," Greta said, her voice softening by only the smallest fraction. "You have a choice. You can follow your wife, in which case I will file the lawsuit at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Or you can pick up that pen and begin to fix this." He looked at me, his eyes searching for what pitié rescue I gave him. Nothing. I just met his gaze. The mother he knew was gone. The treasurer was sitting in her place. He slowly reached for the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He read the terms, his lips moving silently. He would pay an initial $50,000 within 30 days. The remainder, after a full forensic reconciliation of all accounts, would be paid over the next 4 years. I don't have $50,000, he whispered, his voice cracking. "Then you will find it," Greta said. "You will sell what you have. That is the definition of repayment." He signed. With his signature, he also bound himself to 2 other, non-negotiable terms. He would immediately enroll in and complete a certified anger management program. He would also attend mandatory financial counseling. Any missed payment, any missed therapy session, or any hostile contact with me would be considered a breach. A breach would trigger the immediate filing of the full, public lawsuit. There were no second chances. While he signed, I signed my own papers, the ones Greta had prepared. The Doyle Living Trust was finalized. My home in Briarfield was now untouchable. It was mine for life, and no one, not Evan, not Sabrina, not any creditor could force a sale or place a lien. And upon my death, the terms were ironclad. 50% of the trust's assets would go to a new fund, one I was establishing to provide legal aid for elderly women experiencing financial abuse. Evan's inheritance, the one he was so desperate to get early, had just been cut in half. The following day was a day of administration, of cutting ties. I went to the bank, this time not as a victim, but as the sole account holder. Helen, the manager, had already received the paperwork from Greta. She confirmed that every UAQN, every co-signature, every form of access Evan ever had, was permanently revoked. I was issued new cards, new account numbers, and my accounts were flagged for high-security monitoring. My next stop was the most difficult. I went to the local police station. I sat with a detective, a woman with a kind, tired face. and I filed a formal report detailing the domestic incident. I stated clearly that Evan had shoved me, causing injury. I included the photos Marta had taken of the bruise, at my request, and on Greta's advice. I specified that I did not wish to press charges at this time. The report would be kept on file. If he ever violated the agreement, if he ever threatened me again, the report would be activated. It was a loaded gun, held in reserve. The Northwick apartment was listed for sale that same afternoon. The realtor, a brisk woman who understood the situation, had the locks changed within an hour. The proceeds from that sale would not be a windfall. They would be my independent income, a fresh stream of revenue that Evan had never touched. I also made a final change to my personal affairs. The 50% of my assets that wasn't going to the charitable trust needed a contingent beneficiary, in case Evan was ineligible. I updated my paperwork. The new beneficiary was Marta's eldest daughter, a teacher in Chicago. The backlash from Sabrina was predictable. An email arrived, full of legal-sounding threats and misspelled accusations. She was going to sue me for emotional distress and stealing the phone number. I forwarded it to Greta. Greta's response was a single-page letter, sent via certified mail, explaining the legal definition of defamation and advising Sabrina's future communications to go through her, and only her. We never heard from Sabrina again. The 30 days passed. Evan moved out of the apartment, leaving most of his and Sabrina's possessions behind. He found a small studio apartment across town, the kind he would have mocked a month earlier. He started the therapy, and I started my own. I joined a support group Marta told me about. It was a room full of women my age, women who had been the bank for too long. For the first time, I sat in a circle and learned to practice the hardest word in the English language. I learned to say no. On the 30th day, a cashier's check was delivered to Greta's office. $50,000. The first payment arrived, but the real change came after. The Northwick apartment, once a symbol of my naive generosity, sold within a week. That money, combined with the savings I had carefully rebuilt, was not for luxury. It was for security. I sat with Greta and my financial advisor, and we structured it. I now had a protected fund, enough to cover 24 months of all my living expenses, completely independent of any other asset. It was a wall I had built around myself. Marta and I had often joked about our baking. She made an incredible tres leches cake, and my lemon ricotta biscuits were locally famous. With the tension gone from my house, a new kind of energy took its place. We found a small, vacant storefront on the ground floor of an old building downtown. We used a small, sensible loan to rent it. We painted the walls ourselves. 2 months later, a small, hand-painted sign went up, Second Spring Bakery. It was absurd, at my age, to start a business. It was also the sanest thing I had ever done. My life now had a new structure, one I had built myself. My support group friends and I set up a safety call schedule, a simple check-in, 3 times a week. It wasn't just for me. It was for all of us. I reconnected with my godson at the local parish, and he knew that if I ever missed a Sunday service without calling, he was to come to my house. Evan's second payment arrived on time, and the third, after the fourth, he called, not to ask for anything, but to ask if I would meet him. For lunch. I agreed, but I set the terms. A public place, 30 minutes. That's all I have. We met at a simple diner. He looked thinner. He was no longer wearing the expensive, tailored shirts Sabrina favored. He looked like a man who worked at a construction firm. He slid a check across the table for the next payment. It was the first time he had ever handed me money, not just excuses. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I confessed to my company, he finally said, staring into his coffee cup. About the revolving fund. I had to. What did they say? I asked, my voice neutral. I used to use the same password for everything, he admitted, his voice low with shame. My home email, my work email, the Atlas account. It was sloppy. When I was locked out, I almost triggered a security breach for the whole project. They could have lost data. He shook his head. They're making me do IT security training, like a new hire. I just nodded. I saw him look at the clock. Our 30 minutes were almost up. It's good to see you, Mom, he said, standing up. Evan? I said. He stopped. I saw the old tension return to his shoulders. He was expecting a lecture. You're 35 minutes in? I said, simply. Oh, right. Sorry. He left. I had said no, without ever having to say the word. Sabrina, I heard, had not fared as well. She launched a predictable I am the victim campaign on her social media. It backfired. It turned out that the contacts and friends she had been so desperate to impress at Glasshaven were only friends with her money. When the money vanished, so did their loyalty. They were the ones who started posting screenshots of her old posts, the ones where she bragged about the handbags and spa days, comparing them to her new story of being a struggling victim. In my support group, I heard stories from other women. 2 of them, both widows in their 70s, were dealing with nephews and grandsons who had temporarily moved in and never left, living rent-free, eating their food, and slowly draining their peace. I listened to their stories, and then I did something. I anonymously sent them both a gift certificate, enough to cover 2 hours of consultation with Greta Lang. I included a note. You do not have to be the bank. You can close the account. I was busy now. I woke up at 5 a.m., not from anxiety, but to bake biscuits. I balanced my own books. I was paying my own bills, from money I had earned. I realized, one night, while wiping down the steel counters at the bakery, that the thing I took back wasn't just a phone number. It wasn't just the money. It was my voice. It was my right to determine the value of my own life. That night, for the first time in what felt like a decade, I went to bed and I did not dream of falling. I did not dream of being chased. I just slept. My bakery was starting to smell like home, a mixture of yeast and cardamom, when the next phase of Evan's collapse began. It did not come from me, but from his employer. It turned out that the Apex revolving fund he had created was not just a personal line of credit. He had, in his desperation, commingled it with a vendor account, making a small advance to himself that he intended to pay back. But when I took back my phone number, he lost the ability to log in, to pay it back, to hide it. His company's auditors, who were far more meticulous than I had ever been, flagged the transaction. They saw an external advance linked to an unverified recovery email, which in turn was linked to an unsecured phone number. My phone number. Greta received a call from Evan's lawyer. It was a panicked, phishing expedition call. We are just trying to understand the timeline of certain login attempts, he'd said. My client? Greta told me she replied. is in possession of a full log of 2FA codes and password reset attempts for the dates in question. All of them failed. She forwarded them. She wasn't saving him. She was just giving them the facts. The timestamps proved that after the Glasshaven incident, all his frantic activity was trying to get into his accounts, not transfer money out. He was a cornered animal trying to cover his tracks, not a thief making a new score. His company, Skybuild, didn't care about the distinction. They called him before an ethics committee. I learned about this 2 weeks later, at our second 30-minute lunch. He looked exhausted. He told me he had stood in a boardroom in front of 4 senior partners, and he had chosen, for the first time, to tell the complete truth. He told them about the mounting debt, the lies. He told them about Sabrina and her relentless pressure for an image, for a lifestyle built on a foundation of "it's just an investment." He told them he had used my credit to float it, and when that failed, he had panicked and dipped into a company vendor account. He confessed everything. They didn't fire him. That, I think, was the worst part for him. They suspended him for 60 days, without pay. He was ordered to complete his therapy, not just for anger, but for financial ethics. He had to repay the advance immediately. If he did all of that, he could return, not as a project manager. He could return as a junior estimator, the job he'd had 12 years ago. It was this, the professional humiliation, that finally forced him to liquidate his life. The $50,000 he'd paid me had not come from a hidden account. He had sold his car, a luxury sedan I had always thought was a company lease. He had sold his collection of designer watches, the ones Sabrina had so proudly photographed. He had sold the physical, tangible assets of the lie. In the middle of his suspension, Sabrina must have realized the game was truly over. She showed up at his tiny studio apartment. I only know this because he mentioned it, his voice flat. She had come back, not with an apology, but with a new brand strategy. They could be a power couple, a comeback story. She wanted to legalize the joint brand. She'd said, my son, the man who had followed her for 2 years, finally shut the door in her face. He didn't argue. He didn't engage. He just turned off his phone and, for the first time, blocked her number. He was adrift. I knew this. I knew the urge to rescue, the maternal instinct to pull him to shore, was still in me. I felt it, a dull ache. But I did not call him. I did not offer to help with his rent. I did not offer him a job baking bread. I simply texted him a single link, the one my own therapist had given me. It was to a local anger and addictions support group, a meeting that wasn't about a substance, but about the addiction to the act of lying, of spending, of rage. I went, he told me, at our third lunch. He'd brought the check again. It was a room full of people I didn't want to be. And were you? I asked. He was quiet for a long time, just turning his diner mug in his hands. He didn't look at me. I know why I pushed you, he said, the words so low I barely heard them. At the restaurant, when you looked at me through the glass, I didn't just feel shame. I felt seen, like you saw right through me. And when I came to the house, I still had Sabrina's voice in my head, telling me to be strong, to demand. But you were just calm, and I hated you for it. I hated that I had become that person. I pushed you because I was ashamed of myself. I put down my own cup. I looked at this man, my son, who was finally, painfully, starting to see the outlines of the truth. "Shame is the beginning. Evan," I said. "It's the step you take before you fall. Atonement is the path you take to climb back up." Sabrina, it turned out, had one last move. A month after the dining room meeting, Greta received a furious letter from a lawyer Sabrina had hired on contingency. They were threatening a lawsuit for unlawful seizure of digital assets and tortious interference, claiming I had stolen the 2FA number to destroy their livelihood. Greta's response was not a letter. It was a single, curt email with 2 attachments. The first was my 18-year service contract with the phone company, clearly showing my name as the sole owner. The second was the receipt from the T-Mobile store, legally documenting the port-out of my own number to a new device. A preliminary mediation was set. Sabrina and her lawyer sat across from Greta. The lawyer began a blustering speech about digital rights. Greta simply waited. When he was finished, she slid the 2 documents across the table. "You mean this phone number?" she asked. The lawyer read the service contract. His face went blank. He looked at the port-out receipt. He turned to Sabrina and whispered, "Was it her number?" Sabrina's face was white. The lawyer cleared his throat, gathered his papers, and formally withdrew his client's claim. The mediation was over in less than 10 minutes. As they were leaving the conference room, Evan was arriving. He had been summoned to the same meeting to formalize his own progress. He didn't look at Sabrina. He walked straight to Greta and me, holding 2 pieces of paper. The first was a certificate, confirming his completion of a 90-day anger management and financial ethics program. The second was a ledger, showing his next 3 payments, scheduled and pre-authorized. He sat down and signed an extension of the conditional "no contact when angry" clause without being asked. The mediator, a retired judge, looked at me. "Mrs. Doyle, is there anything else you'd like to add to the record?" "Yes," I said. "I wanted this final part to be official. I am announcing to all parties that the Doyle Living Trust is now finalized and irrevocable. After my death, 50% of all assets will be transferred to a new fund, the Second Spring Foundation, to provide legal assistance to elderly women who are victims of financial abuse." I looked at Evan. "The remaining 50% will be transferred to my designated heir, on one condition, that this heir is, at the time of my death, free of all financial judgments and has not had a domestic incident report filed against them for a period of no less than 5 years." The room was silent. I had not disinherited him. I had given him a target to aim for, a path to atonement that required long-term, verifiable change. "The thing I took that day," I said, my voice clear in the quiet room, "was not what they thought. They were panicked about money, about luxury, about access. But the thing I took was one simple, nearly worthless thing. An old woman's phone number. A number that my son and his wife had used as a digital skeleton key. A key they used to open every door, never once realizing the lock, the number, and the entire house had always, ever, been mine. Sabrina's strategy was gone. Her victim narrative was gone, proven false by her own lawyer's retreat. Her reputation, as she had called it, was gone. Her source of money was gone. Evan accepted his demotion. He went back to the office, sat in a cubicle, and began the long, humiliating work of being an estimator. He had lost his car, his apartment, and his wife. But because he finally chose to tell the truth, he had, by the narrowest of margins, kept his career. Mrs. Doyle, the mediator said softly, you have been through a great deal. It is clear your actions were in self-defense. Thank you, Judge, I said, closing my file. But I want to be very clear. I did not get revenge. I stood up, and for the first time, I felt no pain in my hip. I reclaimed my assets. I reclaimed my voice, and I reclaimed my safety. There is no revenge here. There is only an audit, and the books are now balanced. The final door closed. A conditional, permanent, no harassment order was issued against Sabrina. With no money, no contacts, and no legal standing, she left Briarfield, tonight, at the bakery. The last customer left an hour ago. I finished wiping down the stainless steel counters. I closed the register, the small cha-ching of the cash drawer sliding shut. I looked up at the sign Marta's daughter had painted for us, hanging over the door. Second spring. I smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone who had won a war against someone else. It was the smile of someone who had finally, after 61 years, won a battle against herself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are listening from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it a little extra support by hitting that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.